Hi, Becky Martorelli, Master Gardener. Thank you so much for sitting down to talk to me and talk to us today about gardening. Spring is in the air in Connecticut. It is March something, and I'm gonna put my dog in my lap. And I personally have spring fever, and I'm sure you do too. And I've talked to a lot of friends and neighbors who are really jonesing about gardening, um, setting up gardens, and people really want to do stuff now. Okay, so I want to talk about a few things today. One of them is how to start an organic garden.
Okay.
I'm just going to flow through this, what to start, when to start, and then later on, what we can do today to ensure a good. Are you ready to answer all those questions?
Wow. I don't know if I can answer all of them, but the first thing I would say is if you are a new gardener and you're starting for the first time, probably the most important thing is to find a really good location in your yard. If you don't have a lot of space in your yard, you can do something that's called square foot gardening. I can get into that later. But the main thing would be is to find a nice sunny location, and you would want to get your soil tested. And I say that because if you want to ensure having good crop, you want to make sure that your crops are getting all the nutrients they need. And depending on where you live in Connecticut, I live in Meriden, so we have heavy clay soil here. When you're starting your vegetable garden, you'll probably want to loosen it up with a tiller and then add a lot of compost to it. We don't recommend tilling the soil every year. And that's mainly because when you're doing organic gardening, you are feeding the soil, which contains millions and millions, billions of microorganisms that will feed your plants. You're not going to feed your plants with non-organic fertilizer. You're going to give them, you're going to feed the organisms, which will then in turn feed your plant, and they will reap the nutrients that they need when they need it. So starting off with good soil and less compost. Typically, that's something you'd want to do in the fall to kind of prepare your bed. But if you're starting off new now, you can easily do that. Turn the soil over with a spade if it's fresh in the ground, and then really just incorporate a lot of good quality compost. Am I allowed to name?
Yeah, name away. Name away.
So one of my favorite soil amendments, which is really a bag full of really, really good, I don't know, it's got seashells, it's got worm castings, it's called Bumper Crop, and it's put out by the coast of Maine.
Yes.
It is really, really good stuff. I use it on everything in my yard. You can even spread it on your lawn. That's really, really good stuff. It's got a lot of good nutrients in it that your plants, your organisms in your soil can easily break down, and your plants will absorb it. So once you've got your little plot established with good soil and everything, figure out, and this is something you want to do in January, is figure out what crops you want to grow. But just to give you an example, let's say if you're a big salad eater, you could do square foot gardening, let's say a 4x4 section, and you mark it off like little strings into 1 foot squares. And you could plant tomatoes. If you like tomatoes, you could plant tomatoes in each corner because those need to be staked. Then you could plant in 1 square, you could plant your carrots, you could plant peas in 1 corner, you can grow your lettuce. So each square can incorporate a certain number of plants. So you've got your little salad garden going there. Depending on what you want to grow, if you want to grow from seed, check your seed packages. It'll usually tell you how long it takes for the seeds to germinate. And you'll also want to know how long it's going to take before those seeds will reach maturity. So, for instance, crops like broccoli, eggplant, tomatoes usually require a longer growing season than what we can give them from sowing directly in the ground. So those are the kind of plants you'd want to start indoors. There are some plants, there are some seeds you can sow directly into the ground right now because I love cold weather.
Ooh,
St.
tell us about
Patrick's
those.
Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
St. Patrick's Day traditionally has been known to be the day where people would sow their peas in the ground. I don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe because it's green, but St. Patty's Day is when people usually put seeds directly in their garden for
Huh.
peas. Yep. Um, Also, cold weather crops like lettuce. Lettuce doesn't do too well in the summertime because it's too hot. The leaves will burn and they'll just bolt. They'll just bolt
Mhm.
into seed. So you can start spreading your spinach, your lettuce. I would say lettuce and spinach by the end of March. Um, Trying to think of what else. Oh, beets. Beets you can sow directly to the ground. Um, but your crops, like if you like eggplants or broccoli or cauliflower, those kinds of things, you'd want to start those indoors probably right about now, and then transplant them in May, um, after the last hard frost. If you plant them, let's say we have a really super warm spring, it's hard to really determine. Sometimes we get surprised, and you've already transplanted your seedlings now into your garden, and all of a sudden the weatherman tells you you're going to have a hard frost. Just go out and cover those seedlings with either a row cover. You can cut out the bottom of a milk jug and just kind of plop it over the plant just to protect it from frost overnight, and then you remove it
Wow.
again once. Yeah, so that's really easy to do. Um, I can't remember all your questions, but that's basically how it
Go
started.
ahead.
That's
What was
basically
that?
how it started. Just plotting
Mhm.
your ground, good location. You want it near a water source, otherwise plan on getting a very long hose. Um, and as far as fertilizers go, so I use only organic fertilizers.
Mhm.
Um, Espoma has a really, really good line. Coast of Maine. There are liquid organic fertilizers such as seaweed, liquid seaweed. It's usually concentrated, so follow the label. Usually have to mix it with water, so many teaspoons per gallon or whatever. Um, Depending on the crop, depends on how much you're going to need. I'm trying to think of what else I was going to say. Oh, some of the things that I do. Um, our family eats a lot of bananas, so don't throw away those banana peels. When you plant your tomatoes, a lot of times you can buy tomatoes in pot and they're 6 inches tall, let's say. What I'll do, if I didn't grow them from seed and I have to purchase them at a garden center, um, I'll strip the bottom leaves and I will dig a trench and I will lay the tomato down sideways and just very gently tip up the head where the leaves are, because now that stem is just going to put out more roots, and the more roots your tomato plants has it's the sturdier it's going to be. But while you're doing that, right next to that trench, just kind of dig another little one with your finger and lay a banana peel in it. Okay, bananas are high in potassium and phosphorus. They don't contain nitrogen, but it really helps your tomatoes to thrive. Uh,
Wow.
you can sprinkle coffee grounds. Don't put a lot of coffee grounds in, like you wouldn't want to dump a bucket in because it's very acidic. But if you sprinkle coffee grounds over your vegetable bed, it attracts earthworms, and earthworms are great for aeration. Um, they dig their little tunnels, they're chomping on little microorganisms as they go along, and their worm castings make great natural fertilizer for your plants. And it keeps the soil aerated. You don't want compact soil. Um, let's see, what else do I use? Oh, eggshells. Eggshells is another thing. I save all of my eggshells. I put them in a little bucket next to my stove, and then when the bucket is full, I will spread it out in a pan, put it in the oven, and turn it on 250 degrees for about a half hour. It'll dry them out nicely, and then using a rolling pin, you can crush them, and then you can use the crushed eggshells as an amendment to your soil. It'll take a long time for them to break down in the soil, but it helps to keep the aeration in the soil. But what I do is, oh, I have a jar here. What I'll do is I'll put them in a blender. If you have a blender that accommodates dry where you can make your own flour or something like that. I put it in that and just grind it. They start it off at a slow speed and then gradually increase the speed, and you'll end up with a nice powder. And I use that. It's kind of the equivalent of bone meal, but basically you're adding calcium. And tomatoes and eggplants need a lot of calcium. So I constantly am spreading that into my vegetable beds.
Mhm. So I was
Um,
thinking a
so
coffee grinder would work, although I don't know if we'd want to contaminate our coffee grinder with eggshells, but
no, 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 that would no. Um, Weeds, people are always concerned about weeds in the garden. So I have raised beds, raised vegetable beds. It's a lot easier on the back. And also, I can just keep adding new stuff to the top of the soil layer. But once my plants are in the ground, um, I plant them in rows. And between the rows, I tear up strips of newspaper, black and white newspaper. Never use the glossy colored stuff, but black
Mhm.
and white newspaper is now made with soy ink.
Mhm.
And I lay strips of that down between the rows. And I leave a good 5 to 6 inch space around each plant, let's say eggplant or tomato plant, open. Okay. But the rest of it is covered in 2 or 3 sheets of newspaper layers. And then on top of that, I wet it down with a hose just to keep them flying away. And then I'll put either chopped straw on top of it, or I'll throw grass clippings on it. If you don't treat your lawn with any kind of pesticides, you can use your grass clippings. And in the fall, I chop up my leaves and I leave that on top. By next year, the newspaper will be totally devoured by the soil organisms.
Mhm.
And I've created a nice mulch layer during the summer because you want to conserve that moisture, especially the heat we had last year. So,
And Becky, you do that after you've planted everything? So you've put
yep,
everything in the garden and then you do the kind of newspaper
yep,
barrier.
right.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
Um, Probably next month. I went and checked my vegetable beds yesterday. They still have quite a bit of snow sitting in them, so
Mhm.
but probably by next month, I will. Um, I'll start pulling out some of the old roots that I left behind. I clip them down in the fall, like the eggplants. I'll clip them down, and then in the spring, I'll just gently tug them out, and I'll tap the soil off of the roots, only because I want those organisms to stay there. I don't want to toss them out.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I'll start preparing my rows, and I'll add the fertilizer and the bone meal and the bumper crop, and I'll mix that in, and then I'll set my transplants in there, direct sown.
My dog's barking. And you do that prep that you just said right at the like this month?
I you, if the soil is soft enough where you can manipulate it, you can
Mhm.
start preparing that now. Yeah. Especially
Ooh.
if you're gonna plant your peas right now, you can do
Mhm.
that. Yep.
Mhm.
Um, and then during the season, like I said, I leave a space open around the plants if I need to feed them again. So tomatoes, especially, I feed them at least once a month. I use the Espoma tomato tone. It
Mhm.
has everything in there that the plant needs.
That was gonna
So
be my next question was how often do you fertilize?
yeah,
Um,
so it depends on the plant. So tomatoes are like heavy feeders,
mhm.
um, and eggplants. Some of your bigger, basically, think of it as your bigger, bulkier plants.
Mhm.
Give them an extra boost every 3 weeks or so, three
Like
to 4 weeks.
broccoli? Broccoli's pretty big.
Broccoli can get pretty big. Yeah,
Mhm.
I grew it. I grew it maybe 2 years in a row, and then I stopped.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, well,
and
I grew it one year and I was like, wow, this is not very satisfying because you get one crown and then that's it. Then I
right,
realized you can eat the leaves.
yes.
So I thought that was pretty cool. So I'll probably be planting it. So let's talk about what you're planting. I mean, I guess the
Oh,
point is actually I shouldn't even ask because you should really plant. I think you were alluding to this earlier, what you eat,
yeah. So
right?
I used to try to plant a whole lot of different things, and I really had all my plants crowded in there, and
Yeah.
then you just end up with problems. So
Yeah.
now I've narrowed it down to what my family likes to eat.
Mhm.
So I'll grow the peas.
Mhm.
We love fresh spring lettuce, and it's so
Mhm.
easy to grow.
Yeah.
Um, and if you don't have a garden bed, you can grow lettuce in a pot on your back deck as long as it
Mhm.
gets. It's great.
Mm.
Um, the cucumbers, tomatoes, lots of tomatoes.
Mhm.
Peppers. I love hot peppers and
Mhm.
sweet peppers. Um, Pretty much that's all I tend to grow. Oh, pole
Mhm.
beans. I'm doing pole beans this year. I have
Mhm.
some seeds that I saved years ago, and they're still viable. I call them my Uncle Mario beans.
Mhm.
Uncle Mario is my husband's uncle. He's passed away since, but he had this Italian long flat bean that was great. Are you still there?
Yeah, you just turned into a picture of a very cute dog. There we go.
Sorry, trying to call me on my phone.
Okay.
I forgot where I was. Um,
Uncle Mario beans.
Beans, right? So they're
Mhm.
delicious flat beans, and I saved the seeds. This is something everybody can do. Save your seeds from
Mhm.
the first crop that you harvest, and just clean them off, dry them out, put them in a little paper envelope, store them in a airtight plastic container, like
Mhm.
air or the Rubbermaid stuff you can get at the grocery store,
Mhm.
and then put them in a cool, dark place, or even a
Mhm.
cold, dark place,
Mhm.
and then use them again next year.
Yeah.
Um, they say the Bionutrient Food Association say seeds that you harvest from your soil acquire certain um, things from your soil that actually help them to acclimate better.
Mhm.
So if you just keep using the seeds year after year from that, let's say, first crop that you started, you're actually going to get stronger, healthier plants.
That is such great news because last fall was the first time that I actually collected my own seeds. So
Good.
I'm super
That's
excited. I also have a question about the seeds. Actually, it's through my neighbor, Michael. He started seedlings last year. He was like super ambitious, like I think a lot of gardeners are. You know, the first time gardeners are like, yeah, I'm going to start everything from seed. And he was complaining that his seeds were kind of thin and straggly. Um, I was assuming it was a lack of proper lighting. Um,
yep, that or starting it too early.
mhm.
You want to kind of time it as to when you want to transplant it outdoors. So should ideally get a grow light if you want to start seeds indoors.
Mhm.
Putting them on a sunny windowsill is great, maybe for herbs and things like that. But with tomato plants, they tend to reach for the sun real fast once
Mhm.
they pop out of that soil,
Mhm.
and they'll get long and scraggly. And if it's not time to transplant them outdoors, you're kind of struggling with a
Mhm.
weak plant. You don't have to throw them out, but I mean, you could still salvage them because once you have to acclimate them, once you bring them outdoors, you can't just take them from inside and then put them in the hot sun. It's kind of like you going outside and being exposed to the sun. You're just going to get burnt.
Mhm.
So acclimate them slowly. Wind is important. So if you have an area in your house, whether it's your basement or if you have a spare room, and you set up a grow light over a table, then once the plants start to come out, set up like a little table fan. Give that wind effect because that helps to strengthen your seedlings.
Oh.
And then you set in the back for a couple of hours, let's say outside back of your house in semi shade, a little bit of sun, but mostly um, get acclimated to outdoors, and then then they're ready to go into the garden. A little bit exposure at a time.
Yeah, that sounds like kind of a pain in the butt that I don't know that a first time gardener should even mess with. I mean, my advice to first time gardeners would be start off with some strong seedlings and start
Yeah,
from and keep those suckers alive
yeah,
till
yeah.
and do that several years in a row and then you can kind of play with seedlings. But Becky, could you review some things that we could just plant into the ground directly from seed? Because there is something very satisfying to growing something from seed, But starting from seedlings indoors is like a huge process that I think a lot of first time gardeners don't understand. So what could we just put directly in the ground and like grow?
and just let it grow.
Yeah.
Uh, so you, like I said, your cold weather crops you can
Hmm.
pretty much start this month.
Yeah.
I plant cucumbers directly in the ground. I don't start those from seedlings because they once they pop up, they grow pretty fast.
Yeah.
Cucumbers, squashes grow
Mhm.
pretty fast. Um, any of your herbs. I mean, anything that's going to require a long growing season, you really should start a little early. But like I said, start it at the end of April.
Mhm.
Or if it takes 2 weeks to germinate, start it in the middle of April so that
Mhm.
by the end of April, you've got your little tiny seedlings. Another 2 weeks, maybe they're 4 inches tall. And then you can start planting, transplant those outside. And you don't have to worry about them being long and scraggly.
Right.
Um, but yeah, anything that grows like vine, like I plant directly in the ground.
Mhm. Mhm.
Your some melons you have to start indoors. I'm not big on growing melons.
I grew a
Um,
cantaloupe last year. I was so excited, and it was so delicious. I couldn't believe it. My neighbors would walk by and be like, "What the hell is that?" I'm like, "It's a cantaloupe." Um, okay, so Becky, do you have any online resources or even
oh,
books that you would recommend to help the
ab-
first time grower?
ab- I took a. Oh, let me just say one more thing. As far as watering goes,
Mhm.
consistent watering for your vegetables is really important. You want to make sure you've got good drainage wherever you plant them. Um, you don't want them to dry out, but you don't want them sitting in water either. So I
Mhm.
have this nifty little water meter. It has these prongs.
Mhm.
Stick it in the ground, and it's actually a triple combination. It's moisture, pH, and light. So the pH, I don't know if it's that accurate, but it will definitely tell me, hey, this needs water. Okay, I just wanted to mention that. Um, as far as resources go, I took a class several years ago from a wonderful master gardener, very, very experienced master gardener. His name is Nick Mancini, and he put out he wrote a book. It's called The Complete Organic Garden. I don't know if you can still get his book. It might still be available. It is like my Bible, and
Mm.
he has so many good tips in there in terms of when to start your seeds indoors, outdoors, what he does with them in terms of pests and things like that. The other resource I would highly recommend is if you Google the Master Gardener program, they're part of the Yukon Cooperative Extension Service. Master gardeners are required to put in office time. This is part of their job when they become a master gardener. They answer people's questions or concerns about any kind of plant problem you have. So if
Mhm.
you go online, a co there's a location, there's an extension in each county in Connecticut.
Mhm.
So you just call them up with your garden questions, and a lot of
Mhm.
times they'll actually email you a PDF file that'll give you specific info that you're looking for. Or you can call the Yukon Home and Garden Education Center.
Right.
Um, if you want to do a soil test, you can go to the Agricultural Experiment Station. There's one in New Haven and one in Windsor.
Mhm.
They will analyze your soil for you. I believe it's free. I haven't looked into that recently.
Uh-huh.
Or or you can go to the Yukon Soil Analysis Lab. You can find them online also. There's a
Mhm.
small fee for that, but they will get back to you and tell you what nutrients are currently in your soil, and it'll tell you what the pH is of your soil, which is really important. So I
Great.
would doing that.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great way to start. So to review, we're going to test our soil. Hi, Josie. We're going to test our soil, find a nice location where we can actually plant and water.
Yep.
And another thing I'd like to say about location is plant your garden in a spot where you walk by or tend to walk by. I know people have planted gardens in the backyard and never walk by their backyard. So um, I'm all about the front yard garden if it can happen. Um, you can get strong seedlings. somewhere else. If you want to plant from seed, there are some that you can, some seeds that you can plant directly in the soil. Um, and anything else to add? You have those online resources.
Yep. I would also say that if you're going to purchase seeds and you want to look for good quality seeds, organic or heirloom. My favorite seed
Yeah.
place is Johnny's Selected Seeds. They're located in Maine and they are employee owned. They
Mhm.
have really, really good seed selection, and they also have a great resource library on their website to look
Mhm.
up, any detail you want to know about any vegetable. And
Mhm.
the other place I purchase from is Territorial Seed. They're both online. And if I buy plants, the seedlings themselves, I go to Nature Works in Northford.
Yeah,
Nancy
I
DeWitt,
love that place.
yeah, best place.
Top notch. Great newsletter too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sign up for that. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Did I have anything else to ask? I think that's about it. Thank you so much, Becky. Um, I think people will be very excited. Oh, any thoughts on building a, square foot garden with lumber?
Okay, if you're going to use lumber, typically we don't recommend using pre-treated lumber.
Yeah.
I use cedar in my garden. You can ward off moisture by sealing it in with a natural wood oil of some sort.
Mhm.
I mean, after about 10 years, the wood's finally going to give away. But yeah, if you're going to make it out of wood, definitely no pre-treated lumber.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually how long my first garden lasted, was 10 years, and then it just started to fall apart. So, very satisfying though to know that I've been doing it that long too. So, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Becky, for rolling with the punches. We'll get the technology underway at some point. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting
Yeah.
me.
Bye-bye.
Soon.